Funding the attack on Gaza by Israeli forces as a result of the continued oppression of the Palestinian people, members of progressives, the Progressive Caucus, members of the Squad, Bernie Sanders, and others are speaking out not only about the lack of a ceasefire agreement, but also going after the funding that the U.S. taxpayer is giving to the Israeli military. Now, recently, Senator Bernie Sanders had tweeted this, that lawmakers, quote, must take a hard look at the nearly $4 billion in military aid the U.S. sends to Israel on an annual basis. Now, that money, of course, has been used to forcefully expel Palestinians from their homes. Now, the devastation in Gaza, as Sanders said, is unconscionable. We must urge an immediate ceasefire. The killing of Palestinians and Israelis must end. We must also take a hard look at nearly $4 billion a year in military aid to Israel. It is illegal for the U.S. aid to support human rights violations. Now, that part, that's really, really important. Okay. It turns out we're not actually supposed to be funding countries that do human rights abuses. I know, right? And yet somehow we do. Weird. Now, under legal provisions known as the Leahy laws, the U.S. government is actually barred from providing military assistance to, quote, any unit of a country's security forces that commits a gross violation of human rights. Can you think of anybody that's doing some gross violations of human rights right now? I mean, already Palestinian children have been killed by missile attacks. And of course, yes, Israeli children have also died as a result of rockets by Hamas. But when you look at the numbers, when you stack them up, when you compare them, it's not even close. Hamas rockets, or I should say rockets fired by Hamas, are incredibly inaccurate. Most of them do also get shot down by the U.S.-funded Iron Dome. And look, I'm glad they get shot down. I don't want innocent people on either side to be killed, which is why it's important to note that while Israel has a missile production, defense system, Palestine does not. The Palestinians have nothing. When the Israeli army attacks and bombs and shoots missiles, they all hit their mark. All of them. Devastatingly so. Which explains why there are so many casualties on the Palestinian side. The technology and equipment levels are not the same. So maybe, what I'm trying to say is maybe we shouldn't be funding. Okay? I think they got it. I think they can handle themselves. Okay? And especially when we know that this whole thing started when Israeli police were throwing Palestinians out of their homes in order to make way for settlers. These are illegal settlements. So now, again, we're not supposed to fund human rights abuses. But unfortunately, this is America. These mandates have been applied very selectively in practice. So that's why nobody ever heard of the Leahy laws, because nobody ever uses them. So now the other question is, why are we even sending them money in the first place? They seem to have more than enough. Why do they need us? Well, you can thank former President Barack Obama for that. Thanks to a 10-year deal signed during the Obama administration in 2016, Israel receives roughly $3.8 billion a year in military assistance from the United States. In a budget blueprint released last month, Joe Biden indicated that he intends to adhere to the terms of the 2016 deal, which sends Israel $3.3 billion in military aid and $500 million for missile defense systems each year. So why is that? Well, for one, lobbying. AIPAC is an incredibly strong lobby. And by the way, if you oppose politicians or if you oppose AIPAC in their lobbying efforts, you're called anti-Semitic. I mean, as simple as that. A lot of people are incredibly afraid of that charge. And and look, it gets thrown around a lot, especially if you critique the government of Israel. In some circles, that is considered enough to be considered to be a neo-Nazi or an anti-Semite. Okay, and so yeah, that stigma plus the influence of that money in politics, which by the way, all countries do. All countries lobby. All politicians, corporations lobby. There's nothing unique or different about what AIPAC does. It's that it just tends to spend a lot of money because they have a lot, as well as being shielded from criticism as a result of being able to call, critics anti-Semitic. So yeah, but not only that, but here's the other thing. What do you think Israel spends the money on? Well, weapons, because it's there for military aid. Weapons that they buy from the United States. So think about this, right? The American taxpayer is handing over money to Israel to the tune of $3.8 billion a year so that Israel can then turn around and buy American weapons, which then they use against the Palestinian people. So for them, everybody wins, except for the dead kids on both sides. But defense contractors, they win. The lobbyists, they win. Politicians in the U.S. and in Israel, by the way, right-wingers in both countries have it a win. It's so incredibly gross. And I don't want to fund that. I want money. I want my taxpayer money to go to peace. A peace where Palestinians and Israelis are equal and have their own autonomy and can live their own lives and can coexist in peace. That's what I want. You're going to call me naive, but that is what I want. Now, that said, more politicians did speak out, including Representative Rashida Tlaib, who said this: American taxpayer money is being used to commit human rights violations. Congress must condition the aid that we send to Israel and end it altogether if those conditions are not followed. Now think about how rational that is. What we're just asking is, hey, the money that we give you, we don't want you to use it to bomb kids. That's it. You can have it if you stop bombing children. Please stop bombing children in Palestine. If you can prove to us that you're not bombing kids, then you can have the money. And still, politicians, and I'm going to show you how dire this is, how much even that is too much apparently to ask. But again, in our system, it's insane. Okay. Now, in a joint statement that same day, Representative Ilhan Omar, Andre Carson, and Tlaib also said that we continue to provide the Israeli government with over $3 billion in military aid every year with no conditions or accountability for wanton human rights abuses and continuing illegal seizures of Palestinian land. Last month, before Israel's latest bombardment of Gaza began, Representative Betty McCollum also introduced legislation that would prohibit Israel from using U.S. military aid in the occupied territories for military detention, abuse, or ill treatment of Palestinian children in Israeli military detention, seizing or destroying Palestinian property and homes, or supporting the annexation of Palestinian territory. So now this is an incredibly strong bill. 100% support this. Betty McCollum has been an excellent voice in defending Palestinians. In this bill, again, it's an absolute no-brainer. So you would expect that most of the Democratic Party, Republicans, forget about Republicans. Republicans are monstrous. They love what's going on in Israel right now, in Gaza. They hate Muslims. Well, they also hate Jews, but they said that, but they basically need Jews for their end time. And so they support all this, and they love violence, and they love selling weapons to other countries. Doesn't matter. They'd sell them to the Iranians if they could. Oh, right. In fact, a Republican president did. Funny that. Whoops. But all right. So McCollum's bill, how many co-sponsors does it have in the House? 19. I'm going to give you their names. Bobby Rush, his co-sponsor. Danny K. Davis, Andre Carson, Marie Newman, Ilhan Omar, Mark Pocan, Raul Grijalva, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Presley, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Jesus Chuy Garcia. That's it. I mean, there you go. 19 people. Where are the rest of the Democrats? Where's Nancy Pelosi? Member of the House. Is she okay with bombing kids? the answer to that. Imagine if the situation were reversed, by the way, and it was Israelis that were having their homes taken. You know what would happen? Well, wouldn't happen. Not unless, of course, Israel was a socialist nation. Then we'd be absolutely okay with it in the United States. I'm serious. But, like, if, the situation were reversed, as I said, politicians in this country, their hair would be on fire. But we can't even get a bill passed that says, stop using our money to bomb brown kids. And yet, again, only 19 people in a House of 435 Congresspeople, representatives, agree. This does not include the Senate, by the way. The rest, though, are like, fuck them kids. I'm sure they did something to deserve it. One of the videos that came out over the weekend broke my heart. The 10-year-old Palestinian girl talking about how, what do we do? We're just kids. What am I supposed to do? I'm 10. And yet this is happening. I cry every day. It's monstrous what's going on over there. It's horrifying. Look, and again, I knew that the Biden administration is going to be pretty terrible on this issue, on foreign policy. I also knew that even if he tried to be less terrible on this issue, it would still be terrible because generally that's how American politics is. We have been incredibly bad on foreign policy, on things, especially the Israeli and Palestinian peace. Just absolutely awful. But this bill, the least we could do, the least Biden could do, is come out and say, well, now I 100% disagree with what's going on. But no, he says, obviously I back Israel. That's what he came out and said. It's too much for them to do the bare minimum of not wanting to bomb children. Not only that, but the U.S. has also blocked UN resolutions denouncing the strikes, by the way, which those same strikes hit a media building housing both the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. Those strikes, not only that, have killed hundreds of people, including a lot of children. McCollum had also told The Intercept last week, quote, now's the time to send a clear message to the Israeli government. Not $1 more of U.S. military aid can be used to demolish Palestinian homes and its Palestinian lands, or torture or kill Palestinian children. Members need to decide if they want to talk peace and perpetuate conflict, or if they want to really work towards reducing violence and conflict while actually taking a stand to advance human rights. Well, unfortunately, so far, they have refused to take a stand. Again, Biden, fairly silent. And that silence is deafening. Absolutely deafening. Except for, of course, these few progressives. And there is one bright spot in this incredibly dark situation. Years ago, nobody would have spoke out in favor of Palestinians. Nobody. I mean, in this Congress, at least in this Congress, may not be much, only 19 people in the House, but we're making a little bit of headway, and progressives, of course, are leading the way. But it is too little right now and too late, and we've got a long way to go to stand up for what essentially is human rights. And as usual, progressives lead the way. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.